Well, hello and welcome to the Flaming Goblin once again. Hopefully you enjoyed the last episode and the ones running before that. The last one was quite a good chat with Tim, one of our Dungeon Masters, and today we're going to be looking at the Forest of Doom adventure from the Advanced Fighting Fantasy 2nd Edition series. We started running this one last week. The three characters involved in it were Enzio, Peregrine and Ash. Three fairly new characters. They'd done one kind of a one-shot and a little one before that as well, just to kind of get to grips with the 2nd edition rule system. It's a bit different from Dungeoneer, so we wanted to try it out and see how we get on. But this is the first main campaign that we've run using this rule system. So I'm afraid there's going to be a few spoilers for the Forest of Doom campaign if you're looking to run it. It started off well though. It was a nice little group. It starts off with the hook being, well, the hook that we used rather for this one was that King Pindar of Chalice had selected these adventurers to go to the northern borders of Chalice to look out for possible trouble from hill trolls, wild hillmen and bandits in the area, that kind of thing. There's a few background hooks that are used in the book, and this just happened to be the one that we went with for this adventure. It states that the adventurers have been roaming the northern borderlands of Chalice in search of wealth and danger, and are pretty much enjoying their time there. Dark evening is creeping in and they're settling down to sleep, having had their dinner for the evening. As they settle down, however, they hear a groan followed by a dull thud of a body falling to the ground. Is it a trap? What will they do? The book asks. Well, the adventurers carefully creep towards the source of the sound to find a dwarf, who turns out to be Big Leg, a dwarven warrior, who is desperately searching for a hammer, a big warhammer, to get back to Gillibran. Gillibran is the Lord of Stonebridge, a dwarven village to the north of Darkwood Forest, and Big Leg needs to get the hammer so that he can reunite and strengthen the troops against the hill trolls that are attacking the area. Big Leg, however, has been mortally wounded by a couple of arrows which are protruding from his stomach. It's all very dramatic, but the adventurers get out what they can from Big Leg before he passes away. The dwarf tells them of Yaztromo, who lives in a tower to the south of the forest, who may be able to help them with magical goods and potions and bits and bobs to help them in their adventures and their time in Darkwood Forest. He also hands them a map of the area showing Darkwood Forest and Stonebridge to the north. Adventurers being adventurers, they soon grab the 30 gold pieces and the map from his pocket. And so the hook is set. The adventurers know what they need to do and where they need to start looking. Yaztromo's tower. However, it's the middle of the night and they're stuck in Darkwood Forest, or at least on the edge of it at the moment. It's not a time to go wandering in the woods, especially with no light about. And so the adventurers settle back down again by their fire, which is just dwindling out. Sensibly, Enzio says that he will be the guard for the first shift and will be a lookout in case anything nasty creeps towards the campfire. Just as Ash and Peregrine are settling down, Enzio's twiddling his thumbs and sitting warm by the ashes of the fire. Three large giant spiders start to creep towards. Enzio first hears them scritching and scratching around the hedgerow on the outskirts of the forest, and he can just make out the shiny glint of their carapace as they creep towards the fire, or at least the ashes of the fire, and in hope to get themselves a tasty treat for dinner. But Enzio is quick. He sees them straight away and pulls out his bow. Rising Peregrine and Ash as well, they jump to their feet in defence of their little party and are dispensed with. Enzio and Peregrine loose arrows at them while Ash pulls out his twin blades and, using his ambidextrous skill, slices and dices the leftover spiders. But it was too much for the adventurers to deal with as far as sleep goes, and they won't be falling back to sleep anytime soon. Thankfully, on the horizon, light is starting to glint and show, and the new day is dawning. So they head south towards Nostromo's tower, following the basic map that Big Leg has given them, and soon they come to the white stone tower of Nostromo the Mage. It's set back in the edges of the Darkwood Forest, some 50 metres away from the path that they've been following. At the front, at the base of the tower, is a huge oak door with a brass bell and a gong hanging from the stone archway. A small leather-headed striker hangs from the side of the door. Now, when the adventurers knock on the door, they do it fairly quietly, which is good. Nostromo's not the friendliest of people. He's a grumpy old mage, and he's not very happy to have visitors. He likes his peace and quiet and just the sounds of the birds and the animals creeping around the woodland, although not much can be heard around the sound of his tower. After some chat through basically the letterbox of the door, Nostromo talks to them about why they're there and why they've come to this place and why they're disturbing him. They mention Big Leg, and that kind of draws the wizard in, and he's happy to let them in. He leads them up the staircase, up, and they go around the spiral staircase of the tower until eventually they come to a large room full of strange artefacts and potions and bottles and books, and this appears to be kind of the study of the tower where Nostromo does all his work. Nostromo takes the chance to slump down into his old oak chair, reaches his top pocket and pulls out his fragile pair of gold-rimmed spectacles, which he places on his nose. He then relays his story of Big Leg. Well, not so much Big Leg, but the hammer, which Big Leg had been looking for. He mentions how the dwarves of Stonebridge lost their fabled warhammer, how it had fallen foul to another king, who had then lost it amongst the dark wood, where it had been taken apart by goblins and was now actually in two pieces. So not only were they looking for just the one hammer, they're now looking for the head of the hammer and the handle of the hammer. So as it says, so I'm afraid your troubles are doubled. There are various bits that are mentioned that the wizard Nostromo can tell the heroes if they ask him different questions, but we won't worry about those for now. He then goes on to talk about his items that he has for sale if they're interested. Talking through these, full descriptions are given of these in the book, and they include things like an armband of strength, boots of leaping, rod for finding water, potion of plant control, net of entanglement, and various other things. Different gadgets and potions and things that he has made over the past using the ingredients of the forest. After reading the descriptions, I think the adventurers kind of came to the conclusion that actually Nostromo was a bit of a rip-off, and that these goods weren't quite as impressive as they first thought they would be. But a potion of healing is a potion of healing, so if there's one for sale, it's always a good chance to pick one up and buy one. After leaving Nostromo to his peace and quiet in the tower, they headed north, up the path into the Darkwood Forest, finally going amongst the big dark trees of the woodland. And after a little while they finally came to a signpost, which was built and put together by King Koros the Ninth. Back in the day, he designed a navigation system for travellers passing through the forests, and unfortunately it didn't get much further than this. However, on top of this signpost is a crow, a rather large crow, and it turns out his name is Vermithrax. Now Vermithrax didn't always used to be a crow. In fact, he used to be a person, but having had issues with Nostromo himself, he'd been turned into a crow. The crow offers information for a price, of course, as nothing is free in this place, and happens to mention that if he had enough gold, he would go back to Nostromo and be turned back into a human. Now, according to the book, it sort of suggests that either 1 gold piece or 30 gold pieces, which is the cost of him being turned back into a human, will be left by the signpost for the crow to work out and deliver to Nostromo at some point, turning him back into a human. However, the adventurers decided that Vermithrax was probably going to be far more important than was first considered, and helped Vermithrax fly back to the tower along with the 30 gold pieces. Nostromo gladly accepted the 30 gold pieces through the letterbox in his door, and with a flick of his wrist turned Vermithrax back into a human. However, Vermithrax, although he was younger when he got turned into a crow, he'd aged quite a lot over that time. He'd been a crow for quite some time, and slowly Vermithrax aged and aged and aged and aged until finally began to decompose and pass away in front of the adventurer's sad eyes. Nostromo chuckled away from himself and said, "Sorry, dear Vermithrax," and disappeared back into his tower. The adventurers went back to their adventuring and disappeared back into the woods again, slightly sorrowful about what they'd just done to Vermithrax the crow. Anyway, they headed north, which is what Vermithrax had suggested, and they finally came to various twists and turns of the pathways, some overgrown pathways that made them lost and made them lose their way for a little while within the forest, and it took some skill and luck to get them back on track again. They then heard off to the edge of the path a group of orcs arguing off to the side of the track. The getting lost and the arguing orcs are examples of the different floating encounters that are mentioned in the Darkwood Forest. It's a good system. There's fixed locations or fixed scenes that happen, but there's also these floating things that happen throughout the woodland, throughout the journey, much like wandering monsters in a dungeon setting. Anyway, the arguing orcs were arguing over who was going to eat the most of the meat, I believe, off of a scrawny rabbit that was being cooked over their fire. And as they got caught by surprise by the adventurers, they were on the back foot. Again, the adventurers whipped out their bow and arrows to start with, Peregrine firing arrows into the 4 orcs that were gathered around their fire, and Enzio as well. Ash readied his weapons and charged in. And as the orcs came back out to attack them, they clumbered around in the loose roots and twigs and sticks and low-level bushes of the forest and struggled to get to the adventurers, which just left them sort of tied up in knots really as they tried to get through to them and made them kind of easier targets really. Not much was found on the soon dead bodies of the orcs. They were carrying clubs and short swords, wearing leather armour. One had a small wooden whistle on him and 4 gold pieces. We all love a gold piece. No doubt the wooden whistle will come up somewhere in the adventure, but we've not found it quite yet. Anyway, that kind of tied up what they were doing for now. They headed back out onto the pathway after finishing the orcs and carrying on north. But by this point it was quite late in real time, and that was where we left it. We shall see what the adventurers come up to next time with the Forest of Doom. This week we're back onto a Curse of Strahd adventure, so that's using different characters again and wandering around Advanced Fighting Fantasy conversion of the Ravenloft Curse of Strahd system. We shall see what happens there. But thank you very much for listening so far, and I hope to come back to you after our continuing adventures next week in Forest of Doom with a little bit more update on what the adventurers have been up to. There's lots of weird and wonderful things that happen in the book, and we'll see what happens next. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.